So we've talked about how we got here. We've talked about first actions, and much of that has bled into now, the actions of now. There's this idea of, we've talked about hopefulness, optimism, and re-emergence, right? What does the future hold? And what thoughts do you have on that in terms of operating against it and making progress against it? And I'll sort of work through the team and try and a flow here, but I'd love to start. Jeff, I'd love to start with you in terms of reemergence and variability of reemergence. What do you have to say about how organizations, mission-driven organizations, can think about reemergence after COVID?
I think the definition of reemergence is going to vary depending on the organization and your involvement and how your operations changed. I think it's going to be gradual. I don't think it's gonna be one day to another we change from one activity to the other. So I think it's just gonna have that mentality and that flexibility that our work might be changing every day. So I think reemergence is it's gonna take time, and it's gonna be gradual, but it's definitely gonna be contingent to the restrictions you have in the country, and also the trust outside to be back in the outside world again.
That's huge. I think people think that systems can just turn on and off, but it's that human confidence and faith in taking that next step as well that we have to coach through. So I think you're spot on, Jeff. Greg, I think you share a similar mindset. There's contingency, there's variables. We'd love to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, sorry, truck going by. I very much agree with Jess. I think it's going to be a long-term process until kind of we understand this virus and this real risk associated with it and how to control it or work around it. But I think the things we're thinking about as we reemerge, or I guess the kind of principles, I think that we would, and I think we touched on them a lot here. I think connection. Like, how do we make new and existing connections with different people? I think is a principle we'll really look at. I think flexibility, like knowing that it's going to take time. We really need to think flexibly on how we work. I think well-being in the sense of health, but and what people are doing now. But I also think, at least in the space where we work with neglect and abuse, it's really bad right now, what people are experiencing, and so we really, how do we protect well-being now? How do we protect it and heal from it afterwards? So that's another one. And I think the final one that I would just add that we're thinking about a lot is sustainability. And I think this is the longer term piece, but I think these connections that we form now and this re-envisioning of the future, I think the inequity and unequal systems are just so glaring right now that I think this is the opportunity to kind of look at the development industry, look at the sectors of business and stuff. Like, what are we doing that we really need to do differently now? And now's the opportunity.
Need. I agree. And you talked, and Greg, one of the things you put emphasis on was now. And Amit, I know you have a strong point of view on the term now.
Someone said, never let a good crisis go to waste. So we are here, but not, you talk about sustainability, Greg, and one of the things I was reading is how these challenges are not going away. Our focus is on one thing right now, but they're also interrelated. So there are now some new studies that are coming out to show the connection of poor air quality, and inevitably air quality is poorer in more low-income areas, is directly related to an increased incidence of COVID and sort of negative outcomes of COVID. Similarly, obesity, and so I don't know, and I don't think anyone can say clearly. We're hearing different things and different dates and different timelines, and they vary by country and context. We don't know when this moment will pass, but I do think we all agree it will, and I do think that the time is now to think about that. because we are in this moment, this is dorking out for a minute, but there's the Overton window, right, where we can truly consider radical ideas that were too radical. When we were talking about universal basic income as this radical idea, and now increasingly it's a real option being explored around the world. So we have these structural inequities that are in sharp and harsh highlight in this moment. And we have people that are embedded in communities, that are working in communities, just looking at the screen right now around the world. And so now is the time to say, okay, how might we reimagine this, and how might we build this together? And that's the sort of the second piece is, I think, there needs to be a more equitable and empathetic and compassion-driven framing in how we rebuild and reimagine these systems that are meant to serve us and protect us for the future.
I think it's great. And it is interesting to see a lot of the momentum around topics that even 3 to 6 months ago were breaking some, U.S. presidential candidates' aspirations are now at the forefront. It's fascinating how quickly things actually do move. We talked about frameworks, but there's also the, surge and response. Bo, we want to talk a little bit about what you can share on your perspective of emergence in the future.
Yeah, sure. Reason Sunit's saying that is because if I say anything that goes against WHO recommendations, I'm going to be in trouble on two fronts. One, when I go downstairs, and also professionally. I think one of the things that is, I guess, unique about this is that normally when it comes to humanitarian response, we do have a surge, and then there's kind of a clear way out of that. Like once we've provided response and we move into recovery, and it's been practiced very well by a lot of humanitarian organizations. And like I know Plan, for example, has like a different color scale that they know, like we're in orange and we're going to red and then we're back into yellow and blue. And I think with this one, no one knows what that scale looks like or the time bounds that sit there within that scale. So we're kind of like moving from this surge role to get everybody on board to an ongoing, like longer term support role. I think the other thing that will be really interesting, and we work with a lot of, I'm not allowed to disclose who, but like a lot of big tech companies. And what we've realized, and I would say maybe, Sunit, you are going to have a lot more competition on your hands in the future with mission-driven organizations like Boulder, is that never before have these massive commercial organizations had to focus on a mission like this. Like they've always been focused on like their own internal mission. Let's like achieve this goal. Now my cynicism is going to come in, make lots of profits and all the rest of it. But now everyone's like turned it. I mean, we look at the contract chasing app that's being worked on between Apple and Google. Like when has that happened before? And I think what's really exciting about the next part of, I'm not going to take a guess at when it happens, but when it does, the reimagining is a good word. Like, but there's going to be a new of like these organizations that haven't been mission driven are going to be working a lot more in that sense. And even the ones that we're working with, by taking a humanitarian approach or that kind of focus on improving conditions or livelihoods, etc., these companies are achieving their internal missions as well. And it's this really great twist of thinking for them. It's like we used to just focus on profit and talk about like triple bottom line or whatever you want to call it. Now that actually feeds into our profit. So we're going to have to be a lot more focused on this. So I'm hoping this momentum maintains, and I get very excited about the fact that every organization is going to need to be mission driven because we've faced something like this together.
Love it. Oh, we'll take it off. Well, the benefit of being on this side is zero-sum game. We'll take all the mission-driven players we can take. David, do you want to talk a little bit about how you all see how the UNCDF is talking about sort of this reemergence?
Yeah, and I'll move quickly. I first off, I have no clue. But I think this from UNCDF standpoint, I think this question actually ties into the last question in the sense that what do local governments need now? They need technical assistance to determine how they can finance their COVID responses. We're doing that. What do SMEs and vulnerable communities need? They need digital payments so that they can withstand the storm financially. We're doing that. What do businesses need just to kind of keep going? They need bridge loans. We're doing that. So I imagine that everything that UNCDF is doing now, and frankly, again, despite the fact that people are working from their homes, we're still deploying these capabilities. So now re-emergence, I think we're going to be continuing to, to be doing the same things, obviously in light of the repurposing that we had to do. So that's, I mean, I think we're going to continue leaning into our mission, again, with an eye towards helping countries not just move past COVID, but that they can be positioned to experience sustainable growth in the future. And I'll just very quickly, to build on Bo's point about the triple bottom line, what I'll be curious about coming out of reemergence is the blending of capital, and whether this will hopefully really be a golden age for blended finance, where concessional capital and commercial capital are coming together and driving impacts in the toughest geographies. It's happening generally. We haven't seen it make its way down into, make its way to the world's, the LDCs and the world's poorest countries. I would hope that coming out of reemergence, that becomes an arrow in the quiver.